And here we go. It is Indiana in the Morning, presented as always by First Commonwealth Bank here on AM 1160 WCCS and 101.1 FM. And Marty Appel is with us on the telephone. So looking forward to this conversation with you, Marty. Good morning.
Good morning. Great to be with you. And today's publication day for this book, so especially honored to be on with you.
Oh, yeah. And what a book it is. Casey Stengel, baseball's greatest character. Marty, you're the New York Yankees historian. The first question has to be, why did it take so long for you to get to this subject? I know there are so many different topics for Yankee lovers, but this one just seems like a natural fit for you.
Well, it's a good question. Part of the reason is there have been some excellent biographies of Casey years ago. 30 years ago, a good friend of mine named Bob Creamer wrote a wonderful one. But I suddenly found myself with access to things that weren't available in the pre-internet age for Bob Creamer. I could go back to Casey's minor league cities and go into their newspaper archives and come up with long-lost stories. And the Stengel family made available to me an unpublished manuscript, a memoir by Casey's wife, Edna, written in 1958, which produced a whole side of Casey that we'd not read about before. So with this fresh material, I was off to the races.
And you refer to that manuscript so often through the course of the book, and it really does fill in some of the wonderful details about this life. As I was reading the book, I'm thinking to myself, man, Casey Stengel, besides Babe Ruth, Casey Stengel may have been the man most responsible for the branding of a sports personality, which is really common today, but Casey was one of the first to do that.
It's true, and his nickname was So Baseball, it was from Casey at the bat, and he actually got the nickname because somebody probably said to him, "Where are you from, rookie?" And he would have answered KC for Kansas City, and hence a nickname was born. But he was always just Casey to baseball fans, and he spans such a long era, 1910 to 1965, that he just knew everyone in the game.
And one of the amazing things about it is he seems to have had a grasp fairly early on about how his character and how his uniqueness would play a role in really the rest of his life, in the way his career worked out in his life as well.
Well, he enjoyed being Casey Stengel, that's for sure. Even through rough years when he was managing bad teams and not getting the kind of respect he'd hoped he would get for his sharp baseball mind. But he always was confident that he could do the job if he had good players. And that's why he was so happy to get offered the Yankee job in 1949, because he'd never managed good teams. He'd always managed low-budget, awful teams, and as a result was considered not only a secondary manager, but kind of a clown. So the New York sports community was appalled that they would hire this clown to manage the mighty Yankees. And all he did was win 5 consecutive world championships in his first 5 years.
And one of the amazing things about your book is you develop something that has become a phenomenon today as much as in any other day, and that is the idea that managers, they really have to manage player by player, person by person, and take into account the personalities that they're dealing with. Casey, certainly with the Yankees, had a lot of different personalities that he had to wrangle with during his time as Yankees manager.
The most notable was the great Joe DiMaggio, who he inherited in his first year. DiMaggio was the king of the game, and here came this clown reputation, Casey Stengel. And no sooner did Casey go to spring training that first year than on the very first day he posted his spring training rules, which included you can't go to the dog track at night. Well, this is something that everybody knew DiMaggio did every night. So this was a real line in the sand, what was going to happen here. And what happened was that DiMaggio went anyway, and when asked about it, Casey just said, "Well, I have no knowledge of that. I wasn't there." So that's how he dealt with the controversy. And the two of them ultimately worked out sort of a we can live with each other sort of relationship.
And one of the aspects of that relationship was when this young man, Mickey Mantle, came into the locker room, and Casey not only had to manage Mickey Mantle and everything that came along with him, but in the early stages, Mantle and Joe DiMaggio at the same time, and that was a very difficult thing to do.
Yeah, DiMaggio didn't pay a lot of attention to Mickey. They were a generation apart. It was a famous play in the '51 World Series when the two of them almost collided on a fly ball to right field, and DiMaggio said, "I got it," at the last minute. And later Mickey said, that was the first thing he said to me all season. But Mickey was kind of Casey's son that he never had. He was 19 when he came up to the Yankees. Casey developed him. Casey nurtured him. And he never felt Mickey fully developed as the kind of player that he could be. So he was, in that sense, kind of a disappointment to Casey. But for goodness sakes, Mick won 2 MVP awards and a Triple Crown and all those World Series. So it was a formula for success for both of them.
Marty Appel is our guest. The book is Casey Stengel, Baseball's Greatest Character. Of course, when Casey was the manager of the Yankees, it was almost simultaneous with the integration of baseball, Jackie Robinson coming along in 1947. The American League cities as a whole were sort of slow to grasp onto this, and people always accuse the Yankees of being slow as well to the fact of integration. Did Casey have a role in that at all?
Well, the Yankees were slow. They didn't integrate until 1955, and remember Jackie Robinson arrived on the scene in 1947. Casey was a company man. He would defend management and say, that the Yankees were not racists and not discriminatory. On the other hand, Casey wanted to win. He wanted the best players. And when he famously said, when Elston Howard joined the team, "I finally get one and he can't run," people thought it might have been a racist comment. But actually the first half of that, "I finally get one," reflected that the Dodgers had Jackie Robinson and Roy Campanella, and the Giants had Willie Mays and Monty Irvin. Casey wanted his roster integrated so he would get the best players. And he created an environment for Elston Howard to join the Yankees, which was very welcoming. There were no issues. The Howards loved Casey Stengel. Arlene Howard, Elston's widow, still loves him to this day. So like all things race in America, it's a mixed bag. It's our most complicated topic as a nation. Casey was no exception to that, but I think by and large he comes out okay.
As you were writing the book, of course, we're here in the Pittsburgh area. We're big Buccos fans and a Pirates affiliate. Casey, of course, early in his career was a player for the Pirates, but the end of his career as Yankees manager, anyway, came in that 1960 World Series. And you go into that World Series in depth and some of the decisions Casey made and the fallout from those decisions. Talk, if you would, a bit about the 1960 series and the season leading up to it, because it was by no means assured that Casey was coming back anyway.
Right. Well, that 1960 World Series was one of the most famous ever played. The Yankees outscored the Pirates, outhit the Pirates by a lot. But in Game 7, the Pirates win 10-9 on the famous home run by Bill Mazeroski in the bottom of the ninth. And the same week, the Yankees fire Casey Stengel, saying they have a new age limit on their employees. And Casey said, "I'll never make the mistake of being 70 again." But that was his last game as Yankee manager, which is why we devote a good deal of time to it in the book, because it was not only one of the most famous games ever played, but so significant in Casey's career.
One of the more famous incidents in the career of Casey Stengel as well has to do with his testimony before Congress and then Mickey Mantle's follow-up testimony. Now, this was following the move of the Dodgers and the Giants out west. What a wonderful thing that is, and so nice that video survives, and every now and again you get to see it again, and you really get an idea of the timing of this guy.
Yes, you can see it on YouTube. Casey, the day after the All-Star game, which was in Baltimore, they were able to bring the players to Washington to testify before the Kefauver Commission, looking into baseball's antitrust exemption, which is too complicated to get into on this. But Casey was called as a witness, and his answer to one question went on forever, telling the whole story of his life back to his birth in Kansas City. And the senators were all laughing because nobody had a clue what Casey was talking about. He was just pouring on what was called Stengelese. And when Mickey Mantle followed him as a witness, Mickey just said, well, I agree with pretty much everything Casey said. So it was a great moment in Congress.
I guess it was the timing of both of them that was just amazing. They were like a Broadway show, those two. Just
they were
amazing.
Great. And it is on YouTube, at least the excerpts from it. It's pretty funny.
We have not even gotten into the topic of Casey Stengel and the formation of the New York Mets and the rest of his life, but I know where you can get good information on it. That's by reading the book. Casey Stengel, Baseball's Greatest Character. What a great read for the start of baseball season. And Marty Appel, I want to thank you for being with us here this morning.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Sarah. It really is fun.